From LPM,
Louisville Public Media.
Welcome to Where Y'all Really From, a podcast about Asian Americans in Kentucky. I'm your host, Charlene Buckles, a proud Filipina Kentuckian. The years following the Korean War, there was a sudden increase of Korean-born babies who were adopted by families from abroad. Before 1990, nearly 200,000 children were sent to families in Europe, Canada, and the United States. Now, these children are adults, and many are confronting the complexities of their personal history and identities. With me today is Sarah Trainor Graves. Sarah is adopted from South Korea but calls Louisville home. She serves as the Chief Development Officer for the Louisville Urban League. Today, she's sharing her story as an adoptee. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I like to start each episode talking about the title of this podcast, right? Asian Americans, as you know very well, are asked this question somewhere between 1 to 1 million times in their life. So can you tell me what kind of emotion or response does that question elicit for you?
Definitely a mixed bag of emotions. I think sometimes it depends on who it is too, and what their response is. So I don't necessarily have like a knee-jerk reaction. I definitely, though, when I hear that, it triggers lots of memories, right? So all like the bad conversations, if you will. So where are you from? I'm from Louisville. No, where are you from? Louisville, Kentucky. No, like where's your family from? And, throw it into the mix. I'm adopted, right? So my family is from Louisville, like not lying at all. And then it's like, no, but where are you really from? And it sometimes, too, I like to play mind tricks with people, so I'll keep it going. But it's definitely a mixed bag of emotions, for sure.
That's definitely a sentiment of many guests on the show who have said that is, it really depends on my mood. And sometimes I want to mess with people. And sometimes I just, it depends on who's asking, because we all have, as Asian Americans, have experienced that awkwardness of where you're from, especially for someone you don't know, like, I don't know who you are. How are you asking me this really like personal question?
Mm-hmm.
So Sarah, tell me, where are you from?
So I was born in South Korea, in a city, town. I think it's classified as a city, Cheongju, which is a little south of Seoul. So that's, honestly about all I know. But I came to the States when I was a little under 4 months old. So to me, Louisville is definitely home. I mean, like I said, my family's from here. My husband's family is from here. This is where I grew up, where I graduated high school from. I have lived in several different places, including abroad, but I always find a way back here. So 200%, hands down, final answer, I am from Louisville.
Love that. Well, so you told me your family is from here, you grew up here, but how was it really growing up Asian in Kentucky? We are, as you said, people have often othered us by questions like, where are y'all from? Mm-hmm. And so tell me, what was that experience like?
So it was definitely, I think there's not one way that I can describe it other than it was kind of all over the place. So I would say, definitely used to being, so my adopted family is Caucasian. So of course I went to predominantly white church, well, not predominantly, all white church, definitely being the only Asian kid. I think it depended though where we were. So my parents did a really good job of making sure that we knew where we came from, but not only that we, they provided opportunities for us to learn about the culture and the
because language. Your siblings are also adopted too, right?
Yes. So my brother's adopted from Korea, and then my sister's adopted from Guatemala. So we were, my parents were founding members of one of the adoption support groups here in town. But instead of just, kind of, for lack of a better term, whitewashing the group, right? Mm-hmm. They also made sure that they reached out and invited members of the local Korean association to our events, and they would come in and do cooking lessons and dance lessons, language lessons. So there was the intention to make sure that we as the adopted kids got face-to-face interaction and education from people who represented our culture. So that was one experience. But then I always say too, you know, growing up in Kentucky, and yes, it's Louisville, and it's much more diverse now in 2021 than it was in the late 80s, early 90s, right? Louisville and Kentucky is still very much a black and white place, right? It's not like you go to the West Coast and you're in California or New York, Jersey, even, you know, Atlanta or Chicago, where they have these kind of large diasporas, right? Mm-hmm. Kentucky is not like that. So it was always growing up, I felt like I never could check a box, for lack of a better term. So, you know, the white kids knew that you weren't, even though your parents were white, you weren't white. Black kids, you're not black. They know that you're not white, but you're not black. And then even with Asian kids, you know, I remember in school, like the only Asian kids were the immigrants, that, you know, the students who were in the ESL classes, who grew up in that immigrant family. Well, I didn't have a lot in common with them other than just physical looks. So I never again really quite fit in one group. So it was definitely interesting. Definitely say that, you know, I've had a love-hate relationship with being adopted, with being Asian. But here we are.
Well, it's all a journey. I feel like many Asian Americans, especially Asian American Kentuckians, have that same journey. Like you've been on that. You're not. I mean, many and other guests have said that before. That where we're not. People don't know where to put us as Asian American Kentuckians because we're not white and we're not black, and that's really the majority of what people see as the different Kentuckians, right? Either you're white or black. So where we are, they don't know how to put us in that box,
right?
If you will. So you've told me before the show too that you recently are trying to get deeper into your Asian identity, if you will. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah,
that beginning journey.
Yes. So I, you know, growing up as an adolescent, I went through the whole identity crisis thing, and I think that the more I've read up on transracial adoptees, all very normal. You know, there's no such thing as normal, but for a transracial adoptee, that is a very typical experience growing up. But then as an adult, so 2018, my eldest son, Miles, was born. And later that summer, Crazy Rich Asians hit the big screen. And I always, you know, it's funny to say, like, yes, a movie triggered, you know, the birth of my son in a movie, but it's the absolute truth. So, you know, I remember someone telling me, you know, Miles is the first person that you share DNA with that you're going to meet.
Oh, wow.
And at first I was a little offended, right? Because I've never had anyone tell me that before. And it triggered something, and I didn't know how to react with it. I wasn't angry, but I wasn't exactly thrilled about the comment either. I think as Asians and as Asian Americans, we do a lot of processing of things that people say to us. But the more I thought about it, I was like, wow, you know what? That's really true. Miles came out, and, you know, to this day, okay, sometimes I swear he looks like me, and other times I'm like, he looks like my husband. My husband is black. I was expecting Miles to come out looking like Dietrich, my husband, because Dietrich's family and boys run in his family very strong genes. So I just assumed that Miles, because he was going to be a Graves boy, was going to follow suit and look like the rest of the Graves boys. Not really. Now, if you see a photo of him, part of me, I want to scream at people like, I think you're all just saying this because maybe his skin looks like me. I still don't see it. But there was just a lot of emotion to look at this new human and have almost part of your facial, you know, features staring right back at you. And then a couple of months later, Crazy Rich Asians came out, and that was really the first time that I was proud of seeing people who looked like me. And that was the first big time that they hit the main screen since Joy Luck Club. So, and we were little when that came out. I mean, I remember my mom was like, no, you can't watch that. It's too old for you, just the themes and everything. So this Crazy Rich Asians was really the first time where it was like, okay, we are normalizing Asians on the screen. Totally glamorous. It was done like nothing had ever been done before. And it was like, okay, I'm proud to look like these people. And of course, like the designer clothes and bags and the, filthy rich part didn't hurt either. But more so, there was a sense of pride there, something that I had never felt before. But it also, that and having Miles, there were a lot of things that I had to grapple with. And it was very much he looks like me. I look this way. I know I'm from here. But when it comes time for him to ask questions, right? Why don't Grammy and Poppy, my parents, why don't they look like you? Or why do we look this way? Or just anything about where you're from. I was totally ill prepared to answer those questions. So it really forced me to say, okay, you know what? It's time to get real, and it's time to, I've got to go on this journey on my own, because if I don't know who I am and if I don't know where I come from, I can't raise a child that's half Korean. So that was really the kick in the butt that I needed. And since then, it's kind of been off and on. I started little with just going to the Korean grocery store and cooking a meal, in the house. And which we can talk about that experience, because I think you and I have shared things before about, kind of getting ignored at the grocery store, right? When you go to these smaller Asian markets. And then during COVID, I started doing that 10-step Korean skincare routine, which has worked, let me say. It has worked wonders. The glow, I feel like younger. But, I think part of that, I did that because I wanted to find something that connected me to Korea. Okay, it happened to be skincare products. But it was something that I was interested in. I wanted to learn about it. And also at the end of the day, it was a form of self-care, which we needed it so much over the past year.
Yes, absolutely.
So just little things like that. Really just, like I said, having a child, and thanks to Crazy Rich Asians, really started this journey, which is still ongoing.
This is Where Y'all Really From, a podcast from LPM, Louisville Public Media. Welcome back to Where Y'all Really From. I'm your host, Charlene Buckles. With me today is Sarah Trainor Graves. So Sarah and I actually just recently connected through some mutual friends. And we always say that we're it's so incredibly similar. And here's another example of which we're so similar, because that movie jump-started the next leg of my personal journey, because it was really wonderful to see everyone on screen that would look like you, that was living this fabulous life, and it was a huge blockbuster hit, and so it was just really powerful to see that. And it really, and also having a son the same year that both of our sons are 3 years old, and so that also was just that jump start to that next leg. And I just love that you're really diving deep into it and trying to give those smells to Miles at your home, and seeing, going to an Asian supermarket with him. I think that's just really powerful. And I remember you said too, you were looking for his social security card, and something had happened where you stumbled across something from your adoption agency. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, no. So, again, I always say that this journey, it's like an onion, right? There are so many layers that you have to peel back to get to really the root issues. And I mean, I think that's with any mental health or emotional, spiritual journey. So, the other day, one of the things about being adopted, I always remember as a child kind of fantasizing or dreaming about my birth parents. Oh, maybe they were just, super rich and couldn't, yeah, I remember dreaming up stories and envisioning who they were and what they're doing now and why they couldn't keep me. And I think at the core, that's for so many adoptees, that's the thing that you struggle with. So the other night I was filling out some paperwork for work, and I needed the boys' social security cards. So I looked through our safe box where we keep everything. And I guess it was sometime last year, my mom had given all of us copies of our adoption paperwork. And it was a very sobering experience because I've looked at it before, but here I was looking for Miles and the baby's social security cards. And to me, for them, I can tell them where they came from. I can tell them what the lead up to giving birth and all of that, and what happened in the days after, and what they came home from the hospital in, and where we lived, and all of those firsts, right? I can tell them where their journey started because I was right there with them. Well, I don't have that as an adoptee. So I came across the envelope that my mother had given me, and I opened it up because I was thinking about the paperwork coincidentally a few days ago. So I opened it up, and I had seen it several times before, but you just kind of forget what's on there. My entire life story from December 1985 to March 1986, when I came to the States, is literally like 4 typed lines on a piece of paper that is 35 years old. It hit me differently reading it than it has in the past. And it was just very matter of fact. Just very, because it's a report, right? So think about when you're reading research reports. I mean, it's just very factual. You don't get into biases. You just report the facts. And that's very much what it was. It was like, baby weighed was this long, biological father, and mother had relations, but we're not, marriage was not a possibility. So mother thought that, the baby would have a better opportunity if she were adopted, and she was surrendered. That's basically what it said. It was very emotional seeing that because, and again, not a knock to the social workers, to the people who took that report, they were just doing their job. Mm-hmm. But then 35 years later, here's the woman who was the baby reading that. And it's very, very emotional. That's probably just the best way I can say it. Knowing that is literally my life story. And that's the only thing that I have to share about my roots, about where I came from. So that just happened the other day. And it could be too, that drop in postpartum hormones. I'm sure also played a part in that. But like I said, it just, this time it hit different.
Yeah. I mean, that is one part of your story, and it's one leg, but not your whole story. You have so much more to write, and so many amazing things that's going to happen in the next chapters. Right. But, you telling me that, it just made me think, do you think you'll want to go back to Korea and maybe find and learn more about your biological family?
So, I always have mixed feelings about that. And again, I think from what I can tell, every adoptee is different. I know, and even in my own family, I'm probably more on the fence. My sister, who's younger, she always wanted to know more. And it's interesting to, you think about just, how much of the nature versus nurture discussion even plays out in adopted families. My sister's adoption story is completely different than that of mine and my brother's. My sister was 2.5 when she was adopted, and she lived with her family, her birth family, for 2 years. So, and I look at my child who's 3, he can remember things from when he was 2. Things trigger his memory. We'll drive by something and he's like, remember we went there? And I'm looking at him like, how do you remember that? You were 2. My sister has memories of her birth family. So growing up, she always wanted, I would say out of the 3 of us, she always wanted to know her family more than us. I remember at one point my brother, and I don't even know if he remembers this. I remember one night, and I'm 3 years older than him, he was just inconsolable because he thought that, people were going to come and take him away from my parents. So I think everyone's different. I've gone through ups and downs with that. I think at some points I have wanted to learn more, and I think too, on one hand, I want to say thank you for, in my opinion, for not being selfish, for wanting to give me better opportunity. But then on the other hand, I want to ask why. It would be interesting to know if, I have other family members, like other siblings. I do know a couple of people who know their birth families, and both of the stories are completely different. But I would say that has also kind of, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I think maybe I'll do it. And sometimes I'm not. I think more than anything, what I'm ready to do is ready to travel to Korea, just to see it. But I will tell you, I've read my brother sent me an article just last week about how Korean adoptees have connected over Facebook. Social media hasn't always been around, so there's never been a network for, and they call themselves, and I guess I don't necessarily do that, but it's KAD, Korean adoptees, is the lingo, is the term. So I'm in a group called CAD, and it's full of people who are traveling back to Korea, people who have stopped using their American name and have gone back to their birth name, people who were actively searching for their family. It seems like every week there's someone in the group who gets an email, almost like a rejection, right? Like, we found your family, but your birth was so secretive, or whatever. So there's a lot there to dissect. But the article that my brother sent me kind of made me pause, because it mentioned that, adoptees have these fantasies about returning to Korea, and then they get there and they're shunned because, for whatever reason, so number one, from what I've read, the Korean government, just from an institution level, has not been welcoming of adoptees. And I think a lot of it, Korea, like other Asian cultures, very conservative, right? So you had a lot of babies born out of wedlock. So it was almost like there was a shaming there of these young teen, and younger parents who were having kids. People changed the birth records or gave false names. So there was a lot of falsifying of documents. The government has had a hand in a lot of that, and now there's a demand for accountability from the adoptees side. But reading these stories, people said, I've returned to Korea and I've seen, here I am, a native Korean, and I've been treated worse. I see a preference given to white tourists. That was very interesting. So I think, I still want to go. It didn't deter me from wanting to go, but it's also told me that, okay, I need to be heavily prepared mentally and emotionally more so than what I realized.
And I do think that a lot of Asian Americans have that same sentiment. At least I know personally for me, when I went back to the Philippines after 12 years of living here, I mean, that I was, I was treated the same way. They were treating white tourists better than they were treating me, because they thought that I'm supposed to know how to speak the dialect. I'm supposed to know how to behave in public, and like those really small cultural nuances that you don't know unless you grew up there. And you are treated differently. And it is weird being in that third space of like not being fully Filipino, but not being fully Korean because you're not white or black.
Right.
And so it's a really interesting space. And I love that you had said it that way, just because and named it, because it is something that many of us experience when we go back to our native country. And so no, you're not alone in that journey, that I think it's just all part of what this Asian American experience is sometimes. But I'm really glad that you're like on this journey, that you've really thought about this. And as we've said before, I mean, it is just one leg of it, right? It's just one leg of this big story that still needs to be told. And I wanted to go back to what you were saying about cooking and going to a grocery store. I am not the greatest Filipino cook. I'm not gonna lie. My mom and I are very different, and we are very different in the kitchen. So I never learned how to cook many of the Filipino foods. Thankfully, she's here now, and so she is teaching me lots of food and being able. And I want to make sure that our kids are growing up Asian, and have Asian food in the home, particularly Filipino food for me. But that was quite the experience, going to, the different the Filipino store, because I can't speak Tagalog. Like, I know I can understand it fluently, but I can't speak it. And there's still a level of, well, you're not really Filipino, when you go to those stores.
Yes. So I remember I was so excited. Like, I had my recipes, I had my shopping list, and I went with my husband and my son. And, and I think part of it maybe, I don't know if I don't know. I don't know if I was scared. I don't know if I was, I could have asked for help, but I still thought like I looked pretty clueless enough where it was obvious that I needed help. Right. So it's interesting. I wonder, having read that article where they said that, white people were treated better than Koreans who went back. Now I'm wondering, well, if I were a white person, would I have got better customer service, even at the store? It was just a very awkward. I mean, we spent, and the grocery store was teeny tiny, and we had to spend 30 minutes in there. I mean, there were only so many aisles you could walk up and down, but not a single, do you need help? And again, I think at a certain point, I was just like, I'm not even going to ask. Because I was kind of turned off and I was just ready to get my stuff and leave. But it was just a very surreal experience. I don't think one that I was expecting, because I had been there as a child with my mother, but never as an adult. So it was just I think you and I have talked offline about, again, it's like they point you out. They know you're different. So you're almost, there's a level of being ignored,
even within your own community.
Yes.
Or at least in your native community, in which you would think that they would also accept you.
Yes.
So it is difficult. It's really hard. And I know, Sarah, as you know, we could talk for like hours about this, and we have before, but we are running out of time. And so I usually end every episode with some lightning round questions.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you 4 lightning round questions. Are you ready? Okay. What's your superpower?
My superpower. I would say definitely the ability to get things done, to make it happen.
Your favorite song to jam to?
I don't have a favorite song, but anything by Beyonce. is fail-proof.
Your favorite comfort food?
Oh man, that's a hard one. It depends on what kind of mood I'm in. I'm on a sweet kick as of late. Again, it could be that drop of postpartum hormones, but I'm on a dessert kick here recently.
So what specific dessert? I want to see how alike we are.
Oh, so definitely at home, rainbow chip, Betty Crocker. I always have a box on hand and a tub of icing. But store-bought chocolate tuxedo cake from Costco is the devil, but it is so amazing.
And what's the most Kentucky thing that you do?
That is a tough question. What is the most Kentucky thing I do? This is not a lightning answer. I love sports, especially basketball. We are true basketball fans in the state of Kentucky. And I'm a U of L fan, of course. Can't cheer for those boys in blue.
That's why I love you, Sarah. Well, thank you, Sarah, so much for sharing your story and where you are in your journey. I absolutely appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for creating this space. This is amazing with everything going on. This is exciting to see.
Where Y'all Really From is created by Dan Wu, Charlene Buckles, Nima Kulkarni, and May Suramek, and hosted by Dan and Charlene. Our show is edited by Alex Cooper, and our music is by Kojin Toshiro. Leanne Gann did our graphic design. Where Y'all Really From is part of the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator, with support from the Community Foundation of Louisville, Podchaser, Rankings.io, and the Eye Care Institute's Bridgertown Clinical Trials. Our executive producer is Laura Ellis. For more information and to keep in touch, visit whereyallreallyfrom.org.
Support for the Louisville Public Media Podcast Incubator comes from the Community Foundation of Louisville, helping donors in our community establish charitable funds to meet philanthropic goals, creating opportunities to give more through scholarship, charitable checking, and donor-advised funds, and helping donors create a charitable legacy through their estate plan. More at cflouisville.org.